Dave Brooks here, Decibel and Docket podcast. Decibel.news is my website. And I'm here today covering, doing something a little bit different. We're going to cover an assembly hearing in the state of California. It's for AB 1720. That's a bill that would, I think, radically change the resale market. It would basically ban scalpers from selling concert tickets for more than 10% markups on the face value of a ticket, right? So what that means is that they couldn't charge more than 10% of the they couldn't mark up tickets higher than 10% of the all-in price. So to put it simply, imagine I bought a ticket for $100 and there was $10 in fees, right? The all-in price of that ticket would be $110. If I wanted to sell that ticket, I couldn't sell it more. I couldn't mark the ticket up for more than $11, right? That's 10% of $110. So the most I could get for that ticket would be $121. Again, that's $100 face value, $10 markup. $10 in fees, and then a 10% markup of $11, $121. So basically, don't remember the math too much. What you need to know is that this bill would essentially shut down high stakes ticket scalping in California, and could be adopted across the country by other state legislatures, and really end the high price scalping we've seen really take over concerts in the last decade. There's a lot to talk about the bill, and instead of explaining it all to you right here, let's go ahead and watch this hearing and see what the lawmakers say, and see what some of the witnesses they bring up say. Those witnesses include Randy Nichols, who's a frequent guest on my show. He's also very popular on this show. And Joe Rinaldi, Music Box in San Diego, who also, he's the president of NIVA California. That's the National Independent Venues Association. And he has a lot of great things to say about why this bill is important. There's also opposition to the bill from folks from Stubhub. So there's a lot to learn here. I won't get into too much explaining why this is important, other than to say that, I know the media, we kind of tend to present these state laws to our readers all the time as being super significant and super important, and hardly any of them ever pass. This one, I'm telling you, is one to pay attention to. It reminds me of that bill almost a decade ago when the New York legislators banned paperless tickets, right? That was a big deal, created and really changed the way digital tickets were rolled out. I think this is a huge deal and could essentially end concert ticket scalping in the United States in a few years if it was to pass. One important caveat: this does not affect sports, so this would only affect music and concerts. But in the state like California, which think about, we have two of the highest grossing stadiums in the world. SoFi Stadium down in LA and Levi Stadium up in the Bay Area. Not to mention we're home to the biggest festivals in the world. It would have a huge impact here, and if it were to catch on and be mimicked by other states, it could have a huge impact nationally. We've already seen laws like this passed in England, and the Rob Ford government in Ontario, Canada, just enacted a similar bill. So this thing has momentum. All right, enough from me. Let's get to the hearing, and you'll learn all about what's happening. All right, guys, thanks. All right, here we go. Here's the hearing. AB 1720, Matt Haney.
Mr. Haney, when you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I want to first start by thanking you, and your staff for your work on this bill and accept the committee's amendments. And also just note this incredible analysis that your staff did. 21 pages. Any question that you had or thought that you had about why this bill is so needed is in these 21 pages. So I saw how thoughtful and diligent this committee is. So I know you all read it, so we should have no problems here. But it's incredibly well done, and I think it draws on an informational hearing also that this committee did in 2024, which drew many of the conclusions that led to the need for this bill. AB 1720 is the California Fans First Act, which will protect fans from excessive ticket price gouging by capping resale prices at no more than 10% above what someone paid for it, including fees for concerts and other live entertainment events. Live events are vital to California and to the lives of all of our constituents. They generate billions of dollars in economic activity, support tens of thousands of jobs, and bring culture, community, and connection to our state. Tens of millions of our constituents experience these events and want to experience these events. They are an important, even an essential part of our lives. For decades, fans could access events in a very simple way. They would line up at the box office and buy tickets for some of the biggest acts or a local band they loved for reasonable prices. But the shift to online sales has fundamentally changed the system. Ticket scalping has become a highly profitable, industrialized scheme built around facilitating speculating and gambling that is pricing out fans from the market. When you purchase a ticket, it's not that you own something physical. What you're purchasing is the opportunity to go to a certain place and time and experience art, the hard work and creativity of artists, the entrepreneurship of live venue owners and operators, the hard work of the folks who work there and clean the bathrooms and provide for the concessions. That's what you are purchasing. The folks who are getting these tickets and selling them in the secondary market at huge markups have done nothing to contribute to those events. It's pure speculation and gambling, and it is not contributing any way to the supply of tickets or to these events and those who put them on.
I just want to pause it and say I mostly agree with that. I think that professional ticket resellers would argue that they play an important kind of arbitrage role in the ticketing ecosystem. They also, I think that a lot will argue yes, they mark up tickets, but they also mark down tickets. But we'll see why that's kind of a problem too. Just wanted to throw that out there really quick. That ticket scalpers, who aren't always represented in these kind of talks, do argue they have a place in the ecosystem. Not sure everyone agrees with that, but just thought I'd put it out there.
If what was happening online today happened in person, it would be absolutely unacceptable and in many cases already illegal. Imagine if you were to show up at a box office to see a show for a band that you love. You line up, and the person in the front of that line buys the remainder of the tickets for a price you were prepared to pay. The tickets are now gone, they're sold out, and that person immediately starts going down the line and selling these tickets for 5 or 6 times the price they actually paid for it. You would likely want to start a fight with that person. You would call the police. You would say that this is totally unacceptable and should not be allowed. That person did nothing to contribute to the event, and the 5 or 6 times markup that they're taking is put in their pocket and contributes nothing to the people who actually put the event on.
Interesting analogy.
We would never tolerate that. It's not a free market, but that is exactly what is happening today online. Professional scalpers purchase large volumes of tickets the moment they go on sale, often driving these events to sell out, and then immediately list them on secondary platforms. Often they use bots to do so. As a result, over 90% of resale tickets are sold by these professional scalpers and fans are paying by these professional scalpers, and fans are paying on average over 200% above face value for tickets on the secondary market. We wouldn't allow this for many other similar types of experiences.
Wow, that's the average. I don't know where that's from, but the average resale price is 200% above face value. I mean, that alone, should make you pretty skeptical about the bargain that resellers say they provide to the industry.
If there was a dinner that you wanted to go to at a new restaurant that just opened and somebody went online and made all of the reservations for themselves and then forced you to pay them a fee in order to get one of those spots at the restaurant, you would again probably call the police. Well, that is what is happening every single day in live events all over our state, from major arenas to local theaters. Just last week, the LA Times reported resale tickets for Coachella Weekend 1 reached $4,000 to $5,000. And for Weekend 2, resale platforms are posting online bragging about listing the most expensive Coachella tickets on record. These tickets were originally $500 or $600, still a lot of money if you purchase them directly. But I think there's no doubt, for those who've looked at it, that the reason why it's sold out is because scalpers purchased these tickets and use them as an opportunity to speculate and gamble and price out fans. Notably,
I mean, come on, it sold out because they had Bieber, Justin Bieber as the headliner. I don't know about it sold out because of scalpers. It sold out because it booked the Biebs, bro.
Coachella is not a Ticketmaster Live Nation event.
No.
We also just hosted Sam Smith in San Francisco for a 20-show residency at the Castro Theater. Tickets were sold at face value for $120. They sold out nearly immediately. And if you wanted to go to one of those concerts at any point during that month, you had to now pay $700, $800. That extra $600 or $700 does not go to the venue or the artists or the workers. They go directly to the pockets of professional scalpers, many of whom are out of state, who contributed nothing to those live events. They do not build venues. They do not employ workers. They do not create art. Yet they are extracting profit directly from the pockets of our constituents and contributing nothing to the artists and the venues who make this art possible. And I want to address some of the issues that I know folks have raised about the relationship between this effort and the Live Nation Ticketmaster monopoly. There are some who claim that somehow placing a cap on the price of resale tickets is only helping this monopoly. That is entirely false. As the analysis states, secondary resellers and platforms are not competing with Ticketmaster in the primary market. Resellers are actually the customers of Ticketmaster, since they very often purchase the tickets they resell from the company, thus contributing to its success. Secondary markets like Stubhub have operated for over 2 decades, yet they have failed to break the monopoly as the opposition claims they would. In fact, the rise of these secondary platforms has tracked directly with the rise of the Ticketmaster monopoly. These two things have happened at the same time, and they are codependent in creating the situation we are in.
I think that's a really good point he makes there. You know, someone made the argument to me the other day that somehow, dialing back the secondary, pushing back on StubHub would somehow make the monopoly worse for Live Nation. But Ticketmaster, it was so convoluted, I can't even remember how it goes. So I definitely agree with Haney here. I mean, I pretty much agree with everything Haney says.
I want to say, yesterday, in the antitrust lawsuit against Live Nation, the jury found that Live Nation is illegally monopolizing the ticket market. That is not yet in the analysis because it just happened. The decision in this lawsuit will be leading the way to break up this powerful monopoly, and that does not mean that we do not need to act on the scamming and profiteering happening in the secondary market. You can look at that decision and you can see that many of the things that we are also concerned about will be addressed by the judge in that decision. A key conclusion from this committee's informational hearing on ticketing in 2024 was that the current ongoing efforts to break up Live Nation are separate from reforming the secondary market, and both can coexist. There are more than a dozen states who are moving forward to cap resale prices this year, including New York, Wisconsin, Washington. We know from many other countries around the world that this does work. It does bring down the cost of tickets for fans. It does support venues and artists. And we cannot continue to absolve ourselves of the responsibility of regulating the ticketing market just because Live Nation and Ticketmaster have a huge share over the primary market. I will close on that particular point with noting what is in the analysis at the very beginning, where it says too often these policy debates have been framed as a false choice, with Live Nation on one side and the predatory resale industry on the other side. The journalist Andy Cush has described this as Godzilla versus King Kong battle. He points out just because the two monsters are fighting doesn't mean one of them is the good guy. These are two issues that we have to address to make sure that our constituents can afford to attend live events and not be priced out by speculators and scalpers and gamblers who are stealing from the artists and the venues and from the fans and hurting access to shows and events in our state. With me to testify in support of the bill is Randy Nichols, artist manager at Fly South Music and a board member of the National Independent Talent Organization, and Joe Rinaldi, owner of Music Box San Diego.
Thank you. 2 minutes each, gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Randy Nichols. I'm an artist manager, and I serve on the board of the National Independent Talent Organization, as he just said, and we represent artist managers and agents across the live entertainment industry. I'm here to strongly support AB 1720. As we know, a jury yesterday confirmed that Ticketmaster is an illegal monopoly. The real competition to that monopoly is not Stubhub, Vivid Seat, or the other scalper marketplaces. Their competition is Access, Dice, C-Tickets, Eventbrite, and other primary market ticketing companies fighting for the rights to sell tickets from that monopoly. Scalper marketplaces have no box office software, no access controls, no tools to facilitate an initial ticket sale.
Yeah, just again, like Randy's saying, I mean, the idea that the secondary ticket market is any kind of meaningful competition to Ticketmaster, which was found to be a monopoly, is a joke, because it's not. I mean, maybe for the sale of secondary tickets, it's a competitor, I guess. But no one says Ticketmaster has monopoly on the sale of secondary tickets. I don't know if they're even the biggest seller of secondary tickets. That would be Stubhub, I think.
They are platforms that are built for industrial scale arbitrage profiting from the gap between the artist's initial pricing and what the market will bear. Artists subsidize ticket prices by design to keep shows accessible, to build lifetime value with fans. Scalpers exist solely to capture the gap between that and make as much profit as possible and exit the room. If Live Nation and Ticketmaster are to be broken up into 10 different companies tomorrow, the scalper ecosystem is completely unchanged. Scalpers have successfully used the monopoly as a cover for their own harmful practices. Every dollar that a fan overpays to a scalper is never received by the artist, the crew, the venue, or the local restaurants in that community where a show happens. Ticket scalping is not a mom and pop business. It is a private equity-backed $10 billion a year industry operated by professional financing, proprietary bots, virtual credit card generators, all tools that are openly on display at conferences that this scalper industry purports to be consumer-facing protection events while simultaneously selling tools at these events to rip off consumers.
Right, when he's talking about there are like events, like God, I forget what it's called, like National Ticket Conference, whatever, where they sell like IP blockers and stuff like that to like prevent Ticketmaster from using limits on ticket sales. So like they can't tell where your IP address is, or you can like have multiple Ticketmaster sessions open up in the same browser. Like just basically kind of like AI tools that allow you to trick the Ticketmaster system so you can defeat their purchase limits and, you know, scalp en masse.
These marketplaces are not fan-to-fan resale platforms. They have become unregulated equities platforms with everything from hedge funds investors to short sellers. One example of this would be Stubhub's CEO, Eric Baker, who simultaneously to being the CEO of Stubhub runs a hedge fund called Andro Capital. This hedge fund is registered in the Cayman Islands. where they have their what is literally called the Cayman Islands Feeder Fund, channeling hundreds of millions of dollars into ticket speculation. You can also look at Coachella this past weekend, as he mentioned, where you had short sellers selling tickets to these shows and they couldn't cover their shorts and fans were left unable to enter the venue. This is a financial...
Yeah, basically what he means by that is that they short selling, it's kind of complicated, but basically you sell a ticket that you don't have and you hope the price goes down over time. But in Coachella case is so damn popular because of Bieber, the price went up, meaning, you know, it was going to cost scalpers money to fulfill their orders. So instead of, you know, taking it on the chin and actually, you know, seeing the short sell through, they just ditch the sale. And that's not a proper short sell then, right? I mean, that's unethical and illegal. Downright wrong.
Infrastructure built to extract value from artists and fans and buy private jets and yachts for scalpers and their investors. A jury confirmed the monopoly.
I don't know. Are you also speaking? Okay, then we need you to wrap up.
Yeah, I'm on my last line. A jury confirmed the monopoly, now confirmed that scalpers are harming fans and not consumers. I urge your support.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. I'm Joe Rinaldi, President of the California chapter of the National Independent Venue Association and Managing Partner of Music Box San Diego. We are supremely grateful to Assemblyman Haney as he's described the mechanics of this broken market. I'm here to describe the aftermath inside our venues. I represent 650 independent stages, promoters, festivals in the state who are currently witnessing a market failure, not a free market success. In a healthy market, resale solves problems like a missing babysitter, but today we face a negative-sum game driven by diversion. Bad actors use predatory technology to intercept inventory before it ever reaches the public. This isn't supply and demand, it is an extractive tax on our entire ecosystem. When a scalper flips a ticket at 250% to 3,000% markup, they aren't just overcharging a fan, they are often killing a seat. My staff stands behind a bar looking at a sold-out floor that is 20% empty. These are ghost fans, people who wanted to be there but were diverted by a deceptive Google search and priced out. For a 500 capacity room, 100 empty seats is a direct hit on our ability to pay security, bartenders, and the artist.
All right, real quick, he said that really fast. Let me try to explain what you said. So say it's a 500 cap venue. A scalper buys up 100 tickets and marks them way up, right? Only like the scalper then only sells like 10 of those tickets because they're marked up through the roof, and then just ditches the other 90, right? They still make a profit, but the music box loses because they're expecting 500 people to show up. After all, it's a sold-out show, not 410, right? And so it's just basically these weird arbitrage situations that scalpers engage in, messes up how he's trying to staff his venue and run his venue.
We are seeing a total erosion in consumer confidence. We spend our days at the box office explaining to fans that the $800 ticket that they bought on a secondary site doesn't actually exist. This Wild West atmosphere means that fans feel cheated before the lights even go down. We are trading the long-term health of California's cultural economy for a one-time middleman profit. The proposed 10% price cap is the surgical intervention we need. It acts as a disinfectant by removing the speculative upside. We fundamentally disincentivize the professional scalpers. If there is no 300% profit margin to be had, the bad actors leave the room, leaving behind a true secondary market just for fans. Finally, claiming that 1720 favors monopolies is a manufactured smoke bomb. Independent venues support AB 1720 because we refuse to be complicit in a market that bleeds our fans and starves our business. I urge your I vote. Thank you.
It's an interesting question, right? I mean, what do independent venues like less? Secondary business or Live Nation? I think he's made a pretty clear case. The secondary business is a bigger threat to them than Live Nation.
Thank you. And just so the opposition knows, I did lose track of time, but I will give you equal time, so I apologize for that. But anyone else here in support of the measure? Oh, wait, the mic's not on. Just pause 1 second. There we go.
Awesome. Madam Chair and members, Alex Torres with Golden Bear Strategies, echoing some support from NEVA members that couldn't be here today. The Ramona Main Stage, Goldfields in Roseville, the Canyon Club in Agora Hills, and then the UC Theater in Berkeley, as well as the Freight and Salvage in Berkeley, all in support. Thank you.
I love the Freight and Salvage.
Jordan Curley on behalf of the Music Artists Coalition and proud co-sponsor.
Thank you.
Jim Cornett, owner of Harlow's, the Starlight Room, Cafe Colonial, and the Colonial Theater, all independent music venues here in Sacramento, here in support.
Thank you.
Kendra Bigley on behalf of the City of Thousand Oaks in support.
Thank you.
Shane Gussman on behalf of SAG-AFTRA in support.
Thank you. Oh, wow. For anyone who doesn't know, Bobby McFerrin does a sing-along every Monday at the Freight and Salvage. So if you're in Berkeley, it's pretty amazing.
Wow.
And now we will go to prior opposition. Again, I gave them almost 6 minutes, so I will give you the same when you're ready.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Dr. Nicola Harding. I'm a criminologist from the UK. I'm the former director for the Centre of Crime Law and Justice at Lancaster University, and I'm the director and founder of the Financial Crime Lab. I'm here to talk to you about price caps, yes, definitely, but their relationship to fraud and financial crime, particularly ticket fraud. I've conducted multiple research studies and reviewed the evidence from jurisdictions such as the UK, Ireland, and Victoria in Australia. Where there are price caps, there is a fourfold increase in ticket fraud, and it's a serious problem. This happens because of displacement. So when we put a price cap on something, the demand is still there. People still want to sell those tickets. People still want to buy those tickets, but they can't do them on a regulated resale market because they want to sell them for the prices they want to sell them for. So they displace to places like social media and other unregulated spaces that don't have any consumer protections, such as money-back guarantees, etc. What the price cap does is, by keeping it under 110% of the original price, is that it keeps what would be normally a too good to be true offer by a fraudster, which we tell people to look out for to try and avoid ticket fraud. It levels the playing field and allows fraudsters to scam at will on these sites. The research I've done found that when we tried to buy tickets on social media, 3 in 5 were all scam tickets. We were also still able to find touted or scalped tickets in Ireland when we did the study there. It didn't solve the problem of scalping, it just sent it underground. That's further evidenced by the fact that in Ireland, since the cap's been in place, there's been no prosecutions of scalpers, whereas in the UK, we currently don't have a cap, and we do frequently prosecute touts, and more frequently as we go on.
Okay, I just want to pause for a second here. I mean, this lady is very interesting that she would be here from the UK as a criminologist testifying on an issue that's affecting California. I'm sure she's being paid by Stubhub to do it. But I mean, she makes an important point. I mean, that is true. If this bill passes, it will basically send all ticket resale underground. And I'm not sure that's an outcome people really want. But you know, it's the thing is that the resale sites have done such a bad job policing themselves and allow so much illegal behavior to happen already that, like, what we're really talking about is just a shift in illegal behavior, right? I mean, we're going to see it go from what we will kind of see is people using all this illegal behavior to procure tickets. That would fall dramatically. And instead we're going to see is people using illegal behavior to sell tickets and to sell, in some cases, fraudulent tickets. Now, I wonder if the fraudulent tickets would really increase that much just because the volume of tickets being resold would decrease substantially. So it's an interesting trade-off. The problem is, I mean, look, the secondary sites find themselves here because they just can't police their people. I mean, you know, that's why this is happening. So, interesting argument, but I'm not sure I totally buy it. What do you guys think? Let me know.
I've spoken directly to fraudsters who've taken part in ticket fraud to find out their MO and how they do it and why they're incentivized to do it. And they told me that actually they're priced under because they can sell that ticket 10, 15, 20 times over. They don't actually have the ticket. It's all deceptive. And that's fans who never get to be in the room, but they've spent the money to try and be there. So fraud is such a huge problem in the UK and beyond. I wanted to help you learn the lessons because, honestly, fraud is everybody's problem, but it's often nobody's responsibility, and I don't want you to responsibilise Californian residents with the problem of fraud.
Thank you. Oh, wait, you're not on. There you go.
So inexperienced in this.
Strange.
Madam Chair and members.
I don't believe that.
Interesting.
Erin Niemela representing Stubhub in opposition to the bill.
Here we go.
We are one of a small handful of companies that actually comprise the competition to Ticketmaster.
But you're
This
not.
handful of companies represents a total of 6% of the marketplace. That is not Ticketmaster. I'd like to start by actually agreeing with the author of this bill on the history of competition. It is true, we used to have a competitive marketplace until Ticketmaster consolidated that marketplace to the 94% they now control. That was the basis of that lawsuit. And that is why prices have gone up 120% since that occurred. I would also like to agree with the author on we used to have paper tickets until Ticketmaster, the entity that controls 94% of the marketplace, implemented safe ticks technology to actually control all electronic tickets and prohibit normal customers from being able to transfer even a paper ticket to a friend at will.
Well, she's trying to bring up Ticketmaster as much as possible here to scare the assembly. I wonder, she's in California, so I think next she's got to bring up Trump if she really wants to scare Californians. Two things they don't like, Ticketmaster or Trump. Let's see what she says.
We oppose this bill for a number of reasons, but the foremost reason among those is that Ticketmaster is exempt from this bill entirely. In fact, they are exempt from this chapter of law. This entire chapter,
That's not true.
in section 22503.5, any primary ticket seller in this chapter is exempted from all of the regulations relating to ticketing. That is not something proposed in the author's bill. That's in the chapter. It was adopted in 1986 when the legislature saw fit to exempt Ticketmaster from California ticketing laws. While this bill today considers a proposal to eliminate the competition for Ticketmaster, because that's what this would do. Yesterday, as the author pointed out, a jury found that Ticketmaster is guilty of being a monopoly. The case was led by our California AG and 30 other states. It found its impetus in the Biden administration challenging the Ticketmaster monopoly, and in a weird bipartisan twist, the Trump administration, even after gutting Biden's DOJ, even after pardoning the key testimony in this case through a criminal pardon, even after Kellyanne Conway being added to Ticketmaster's board, even after that, the Trump DOJ proposed a settlement agreement to break up Ticketmaster and also open up Ticketmaster to retail competition. There has been a lot of discussion this year, and appropriately so, on monopolies. Even the Trump DOJ said this was the #1 monopoly in the country.
Now I've let you go longer. See, I'm really not doing my job up here.
Can I wrap it up, ma'am?
Yes, please. Sorry.
This bill has been introduced in 26 states, supported by Ticketmaster, and it has succeeded in none. So we are asking you today to not tilt the scales in favor of Ticketmaster and let the courts do their work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other folks here in opposition? Name, organization, and position. Go ahead.
Madam Chair and members, Courtney Jensen on behalf of SeatGeek, TickPick, and Game Time in opposition.
Thank you.
Oh, man. Okay.
Madam Chair, members, James Jack here on behalf of the Coalition for Ticket Fairness and Opposition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair and members, Robert Boykin with TechNet in opposition.
Thank you.
Christopher Sanchez with the Consumer Federation of California in opposition.
Doug Kessler for Patone 924 in opposition.
I accidentally wore Dodgers blue today, so to be clear, still a Giants fan.
Estea Kessler. I'm a school board member with representing the Central Valley Latino mayors and elected official coalitions, and we're in opposition.
Thank you.
My name is Nora Canetti, and I am here on behalf of the Multicultural Business Alliance, the Latin Business Association, the Hispanic 100, the Latin American and Caribbean Business Chamber of Commerce, and the Hispanic Chambers of Commerce of San Francisco in opposition to AB 1720. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Anthony Butler Torres on behalf of the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Austin Hayworth on behalf of Internet Works, multiple members in opposition.
Thank you.
Juanita Martinez on behalf of the California Live Events Equity Alliance in opposition, along with the California Black Chamber. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delilah Clay on behalf of California LULAC and NAN Sacramento in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bringing it back to the dais. I do want to make one point before I hand it over to my colleague, Mr. Bryan. This committee did move a bill by Mr. Bryan that addressed some of the things that were in your opening remarks related to the tickets that were not yet available and things like that. And so I think there is a more global solution that's moving, and just wanted to point that out. And also I wanted to ask one question, which is, I don't believe what Ms. Niemela said in her opening remarks, that the entire chapter exempts the primary market holders is your intent. We are looking into that. But if the secondary market that Ticketmaster has, just so everyone's clear, Ticketmaster holds both a primary market role and a secondary market role. I don't think your intent is to exempt their secondary market from this bill. Is that right, Mr. Haney?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I don't know where this came from. That's the first fantastical assertion of that we've heard. It absolutely would apply to Ticketmaster. The Ticketmaster is one of, if not the biggest resellers, and their resale market would be capped in the same way as all of the other resale would under the bill.
And I assume if we needed technical changes to make that a reality.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. And now, Mr. Bryan.
Thank you. No, and Madam Chair, I had a similar thought. Well, first of all, I saved all my questions on the last bill so that I could have some fun here. I had a similar thought because it seems like Stubhub picks and chooses when it's a competitor to Ticketmaster and when it's completely different. Mentioning 6% of the competition to Ticketmaster, I have a couple questions for Stubhub. Do you have any artists signed us up to Stubhub?
We do not.
Do you have any
We do not operate in
Do you
the
have any
primary
venues that have contracts with StubHub?
Absolutely not.
Do you have any logistics that you put on to facilitate concerts, shows, or entertainment performances?
No, we are not a
Do
monopoly.
you finance tours or any part of the entertainment industry at all?
No.
Do you play any instruments?
Actually, well, StubHub does not.
The
as far
point
as I
I'm
know.
getting at is that I wouldn't argue that 6% that StubHub is 6% of anything that has to do with putting on live entertainment. It's not the creators of the entertainment. It's not the venues that are hosting. It doesn't help with the logistics. It doesn't finance any of the tours. It's not the artists who create. It's not the fans who show up. I would argue that StubHub is bottom feeding on the person-to-person transactions that should be happening between fans and consumers, and taking its percentage and created what has turned into such a large 6% of a market that it doesn't contribute to.
Wow.
In a
This guy
way
is not
that has now
a fan of
created this
StubHub.
issue. Because StubHub, what used to be, I buy a ticket, I go to a show, I can't make it to the show, I sell it to Assemblymember Haney, now gets muddied by the gross bot buying that is absolutely taking place, the speculative ticket buying that is absolutely taking place until we pass our bill later this year. And I just don't think that it's fair to always point the finger at Ticketmaster without looking at the practices that are happening with StubHub. And I think that's the reason bills like this are existing. I have a question for the author. What do you say to the idea of the rise of potentially underground illicit markets, which I don't think I had heard before, but to some degree makes some logical sense? If I can sell this ticket for 5x, but I can't do it online for 5x, why wouldn't I go to some other means? We just had a bill we just heard about online targeting of young children and keeping kids off the internet. How do we know that Snapchat doesn't turn into the new the ticket selling space if we do something like this?
Well, as you said, some of this is happening now, currently, and we've seen this recently with Coachella, with tons of examples of folks being scammed. I mean, issues related to stopping this type of fraud and these types of scams exist currently, and they're happening off on different types of platforms and all of that. So that is a concern. It's one that exists right now. In the analysis that they did in these other countries that have had some types of caps, they haven't been able to demonstrate in any way that the caps were the cause of any additional type of fraud. That is not a part of their analysis, and there's been no analysis that actually shows that caps increase more fraud in that way. I do think that what we want to be clear about is that under this bill, you can still resell, and these platforms will still exist. And what will be different is that you will have to also upload the original ticket so that we know exactly how much you paid for it. And there's actually more confirmation to prevent fraud that will be required as a result of this bill on these platforms. In countries that have similar types of caps, they still have these platforms. In fact, in Ireland, more of these platforms came about after their caps went into place. And so these will still be the trusted place where people can get a ticket. If you go onto social media or you go and right now that happens, and there's a ton of risk involved with that. And people should know that there will be a ton of risk involved with that, especially if you know as a consumer that the law now says you're not supposed to pay more than 10% above what the person or broker paid for it initially. And if you're going on and buying a ticket that you know is 400%, 500% more than what the face value is, you can be pretty sure there's a decent chance that something's shady about that because they're already doing what they shouldn't be doing. So there's some more clarity that it will exist for consumers because they will know that it should only be 10% more than what the face value or total price that was paid. So that was I think there right now it is a free for all because there are no rules about reselling currently. So people are getting these kind of sort of on social media and other places because people don't know the rules of what they should actually expect to pay and have the verification of that, which will be required under this bill.
Do you worry at all that some consumers and fans are going to be punished by the shameful practices of the secondary market? And I'll give you an example. Adele had a residency in Vegas. I got tickets to the last show of the residency. I had to prove I was an Adele fan. It was a lottery process, which I think belong in her artist rights. She can make sure real fans can buy the ticket. I couldn't make it to the show. I was heartbroken. I sold it for substantially more than I paid for it because that's what the market dictated for Adele's last show in Vegas. That couldn't happen under this bill, right?
That could not happen under this bill. You can still have special access for real fans, and I feel bad for the person who paid that huge markup.
Why do you need a markup?
Who's a fan? But you would still be able to resell your ticket. You would still be able to go through that process to buy the ticket. What would be different is you could not then turn around and sell it for a huge markup. You would sell it for up to 10% more than what you paid for it, so that a real fan could have access to it. Right now, over 90% of the tickets, though, on these platforms are from, as you know, from these brokers and scalpers. They're not the situation that you're describing. And even though you may have had that one situation, all of the other concerts and all of the other times you wanted to see folks, you're also getting screwed by this overall. So whatever you made on the net on that, you've paid back many times over in all the other events that you've had to go through this process and have to contend with these scalpers and the way that they extract from real fans. So that would not be allowed, although really this is about targeting these industrial resellers. We're very explicit about that in the bill. The enforcement would be from the Attorney General. So with the committee's amendments, it's about having sites where you'll be required to upload the ticket and be very transparent about it. It's not about going after Assemblymember Isaac Bryan, who couldn't make a concert, which you'd still be able to resell it for sure, but not at a huge markup. And there would be another Adele fan who would, like yourself, a super fan, who would be able to see it at a slightly more affordable price.
And the last thing I'll say is just the reference you made about King Kong and Godzilla and maybe there are no good actors. I think that was a perfect analogy for this situation. If I support this bill today, it's only...
The other problem with his analogy is that Adele played in Vegas, which is not in the state of California. So wouldn't even apply here.
Only going to be because I think the author is fantastic and I think the secondary market's political and business practices are shameful.
Thank you. And I will say through the quick work of committee staff, there is some ambiguity. And this is why the legislative process is so important. And so we will be recommending a couple technical amendments to make sure the secondary market by the primary market holders is included.
And absolutely. And to be clear, it sounded like that was something that was already in law. Yes. It was not something we were proposing.
Yes.
So,
right.
Absolutely.
We can just exempt this section from that piece, which will be easy to do. So thank you for raising that with us, and we will clear that up. Appreciate that. Ms. Wicks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My favorite topic, ticketing. So I have kind of really just sort of questions, both for the supporters and the opposition. And I know this is like a very complicated space. I have the scars to prove it. So one, to the author, I think you're trying to solve a real problem. Like, I totally agree that this problem exists. I did I think a Zoom last week.
She tried to introduce some legislation. I don't remember what it did like a while ago. It was crazy.
With some of the venues in my district and some of the other folks who have worked on this. There's absolutely this problem, and it's pretty shameful, actually. And who suffers is the consumer, ultimately, right? And I like the term industrial resellers. I think that's a good way to put it. And you have people basically just like profiting off of this. It doesn't help the artists, it doesn't help the fans, doesn't help the venues, doesn't help anyone. So I think that I appreciate that you're trying to solve a problem. So I want to start with that.
Pretty ambitious.
To the point about what Mr. Bryan had said, is there a way, are there other alternatives to craft policy? And I don't mean to sort of put you on the spot here, and I would actually ask this of the opposition and the supporters, to craft a policy that can go after these industrial resellers without going after Mr. Isaac Bryan. Since he offered himself up as an example, to allow for an individual who can't go, wants to resell their ticket, the market's dictating a certain price. So allowing these sort of like one-off sort of individual, I don't want to say exemptions, but something to that effect, while still targeting these like the bots and the industrial resellers and the people who are really driving up the price and really focusing the policy change on that universe of participants in this ecosystem?
Well, a few things with that. One is absolutely we are still allowing for tickets to be resold. So in the case of Isaac Bryan, he's being used now as our friend, a theoretical Adele superfan who happens to be an assembly member from Los Angeles. You would still be able to resell the ticket, and there are currently. I mean, I had a show. I got tickets to a theater show in San Francisco recently, and I couldn't make it. Date canceled on me, and so I had to then resell the tickets. Or I wanted to resell the tickets. Actually, that theater doesn't allow you to resell tickets at all, and so I just had to take the loss there. So we are allowing for tickets to be resold, and you want to make sure you're selling it at a fair price, but also one that is for a real fan. And so that's the first part of it. We are allowing that in that case. You're not able to, though, turn around and make a huge profit off of it, whether you're a scalper, broker, reseller, or an individual, because we want to make sure these are accessible to fans and they're not being used for speculating or gambling. You're not going to extract a huge profit simply because you got there first when you had nothing to do with the show or the art or the venue, right? You're just making it because you got there first, and now you're able to extract from somebody else who actually wants to have the experience. With all of that said, the bill is very clear that this is about, in terms of the enforcement, would be with the Attorney General and about these industrial resellers and not having these massive by design operations that utilize these huge platforms where they can use them to extract huge profits. and they're going to have to be able to verify on those platforms that folks are charging not more than 10% of what they paid for it. So it's in allowing the resale and allowing the enforcement. But I guess we can differ on the question of whether that was fair, what Assemblymember Bryan did. But the fundamental point here is any enforcement, the real issue is the industrial resellers. And if an individual can't make it, they can still resell their ticket. But it's about creating accessibility for fans, not even for an individual, about making profit for yourself for an event that you really didn't contribute to.
And I'm happy to hear from through the chair, if she will allow, ideas from both the opposition and the supporters around other alternatives, because I get what you're trying to do. What I do worry about with this bill, though, is it will exacerbate the monopoly of Ticketmaster. And so is there a way to tackle the problem you're trying to tackle, which is a real one and a legitimate one, by creating a policy that goes after the industrial resellers, but doesn't by doing that basically put out of business all the other ticket sellers, which is likely to happen, I would assume?
We currently have a bunch of different companies in the market. There's Cash or Trade, there's Twickets, there's Tixel. There's a bunch of companies that are fan-to-fan ticket marketplaces. They typically charge like a 10% fee to 15% fee for the ticket sale, and they allow fans to resell the tickets at face value, and it's a viable business. They're just not publicly traded or large private equity-backed businesses. They're simply tools to allow fans to pass along tickets. So the question is, are we looking to allow companies to exist to help fans pass along their ticket when they can't go? Or are we looking to protect these large private equity-backed businesses to rip off fans with 40 and 50% fees? Because we can make it work, and it does work. In Australia, for instance, there's a company called Tixel, and they're now in the States as well, and they operate perfectly fine with the ban on resale there, and or the ban, with the cap. So it works, and companies can exist. Stubhub can exist. Will they make as much money as they do today? No, because currently they charge 40% fees on their tickets. Those fees are then used for SEO to go out and buy every spot on Google. When an artist tries to list their show, they have to pay more money than StubHub, which they can't afford. So fans get tricked into going to StubHub to buy the ticket. So there are viable solutions today. It will just cut their profits and their ability to own SEO.
If Assemblymember, may I jump in here?
And if I may, because I actually have something to add, a question for you. So before you do, so I will say this committee looked at the question you're asking. One of the problems is if you start to put a cap on the number an individual sells, right? So let's say, I imagine maybe Isaac sells more than 10 a year, but like if you were to say, okay, this only applies, nothing would stop these industrial sellers from just basically starting new entities every time they hit 10. So that's the giant loophole we were worried about. But the question I wanted to add for you before you, so that you can say two things at once, was I don't think it is the author's intent, and it surely wasn't this committee's intent, to put Stubhub out of business. I don't think that's what anyone wants to do, and it's why the bill explicitly allows for fees to be charged, so that there is a business model. So I don't know if it's, I know you don't like the bill at all, but is there a fee percentage that would be more comfortable for Stubhub that would allow you to thrive, but would allow us to continue with this policy forward? In addition to answering Ms. Wicks's question,
I actually think, Madam Chair, the more comfortable conversation would be to have a conversation about the entire ecosystem. There is nothing in this bill that says there should be a 10% cap on fees that Ticketmaster charges. There is nothing in this bill that says there should be a 10% cap on ticket prices across the board over which venues and artists are paid. And these are all the things, by the way, that are the subject of the lawsuit that the AG in 30 states just won yesterday. And going...
No, that's not correct. Okay, so I want to say one thing. I think she makes a good point, but Stubhub also charges fees. They both charge fees. Okay, what we're talking about Stubhub is we're talking about markup on top of the fees. And by the way, the subject of the lawsuit had to do with venue ticketing. It had nothing to do with the fees that Ticketmaster charges. Now, there was the damages were based on the percentage, the cost of tickets after fees, but that is derived from the venue deals, not from the fees placed on each ticket. I mean, we're kind of talking in circles here, but I love the lady can't answer the question. It's like, okay, well, how much? What if we wanted to cap markup? Like, what could we cap it at? And she can't answer that.
Forward in this process, that is what is going to be explored, because the flywheel that is Ticketmaster is the very accusation here is that they do control prices, that they raise prices, that there is no face value, that they increase prices. You have a scarce resource, in essence. It's finite. And you have one player that is deciding how many are available and what cost and what artists are being paid and what venues are being paid. And the assembly member touched on something that was really key, which is he purchased a ticket and he was unable to get rid of that ticket. He was actually prohibited from it. There are 6 other states, including New York and Illinois, that allow consumers to transfer their tickets. As we talked about, Assemblymember Wicks had a bill that actually created transparency in the ticketing space, where retailers would compete against each other for customers and the best price. And that was actually a subject of the settlement agreement proposed by the Trump administration, and which in theory will be a part of this discussion now secured by our AG and those 30 states. So the answer is really not to put your finger on the scales, but to allow for this entire ecosystem to be scrutinized in reforms.
And then I know that I had interrupted the answer to Ms. Wicks's question. I don't know if you wanted to address what she had said about the industrial versus the individuals.
Yeah, are there other alternatives that would actually get to that either of you maybe know that would get to this problem of the industrial reseller?
I think for me, obviously, I'm here to talk about fraud and the relationship. One of the earlier statements was that there's no research that demonstrates that there's a correlation between price caps and fraud. There is. That's the research that I've been doing, and I can evidence that. The problem is this displacement. So the thing that's going to be protective against those fraud increases is by keeping consumers doing the transaction in these safe spaces that can be regulated. The key problem is that when we do put a price cap on and people know, especially when it's in recent memory, that they can go and charge far higher, they'll go to spaces where nobody's policing whether they do that or not. And that could be in person, it could be online, it can be to like friends or friends of a friend, it can be in private groups, or it can be in the public mainstream. But where it won't be is on reseller sites that are adhering to the laws that you set, because they won't be able to accept anything over the 110% cap. So that's why the displacement happens, and that's why fraud grows. So whilst there are ticket platforms in places like Australia, as has been mentioned, that do this, they have still seen this 4 times increase in fraud. They ticket in a comparable economy. Ticketing fraud in the UK is around 3.5%. In Australia and Victoria, it's around 13%. So,
but do you have an answer to her question about alternatives?
But I think it comes back to there are ways of making that arena more transparent, like interoperability, showing the consumer from a behavioural point of view that if they know what the ticket was, what it cost in the first place, they can make more informed decisions. That's not something that's currently happening, and it may make them to, understand not to move over to those displaced arenas.
Can I address something from your question?
Well, let's make sure, yes, but let's make sure Ms. Wicks is complete before I totally derail what she's asking.
It's an active conversation. I love it, as it always is in ticketing. And then also I believe Massachusetts had a similar law on the books, which they don't anymore. Can anyone give context to that?
Sure. It was passed in 1924. And
before,
so kind of vaudeville era, I guess. I don't know. And then it was repealed in 2024 because it was determined to not be operational. The secondary market doesn't have transparency, so you can't really implement a cap when you don't know what the face value of a ticket is, when the face value keeps changing because it depends on what the primary ticketer wants to charge at any given point in time.
So just for the record, I don't know if opposition wants to speak to this. My understanding from my staff is that it's sunset after 100 years. So it wasn't pulled back intentionally, but I don't know if
correct.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a law that they just haven't addressed yet. But it was a law written before the digital era of tickets, obviously from the 1920s, and they haven't corrected the situation yet. It wasn't pulled because of a specific issue.
Actually, there was an entirely new law passed that dealt with ticketing transparency, price transparency. They actually passed a complete and comprehensive reform act. It doesn't include all the elements we would like to see, or Ticketmaster or any of the other interest groups, but they did pass a subsequent bill in 2024.
So I'll just wrap up, and then the fact that Ticketmaster's supporting this bill gives me pause because it makes me think this is a competitive advantage for them. If this goes into law, they like that, and they have proven to have monopolistic behavior as per the court decision yesterday. So I have concern, although I do appreciate the desire to try to fix the problem. I'm going to lay off for today, but I'm also happy to work with the author and the supporters and the opposition to see if we can figure out a way to really target those industrial resellers as this bill moves through the process. I assume it's going to get through today, and I want to offer, if you want it, a seat at the table to try to figure out that piece of it to Mr. Haney in the hopes that I can support it down the road.
Mr. Haney?
Yeah, absolutely. And a few things on that particular issue. We put language in there that any enforcement will be targeted at industrial resellers. Would love to work with you to even strengthen that and clarify it further. That really is the intent here. And we get in a tricky space when you're talking about the individual and such, because that's really not the focus of the bill. I want to say a few things about this sort of Ticketmaster issue, because I know it comes up a lot. All of those examples that I gave here, the Coachella, the Taylor Swift one, the Sam Smith one, these are not Ticketmaster Live Nation venues. So this is obviously a huge problem with the secondary market, the speculation, the gambling that's happening, even aside from the Ticketmaster issue. I think one thing that has changed as of yesterday is the lawsuit was decided and found that Ticketmaster is a monopoly. That means that there's going to be a significant set of changes as it relates to Ticketmaster and Live Nation that's going to happen because of that court case. They're going to be able to the judge is going to be able to possibly break up Ticketmaster Live Nation. There's issues of fees and venues and their role with artists. A lot of the concerns that we have with what has happened with the primary market will be addressed with that court case, and that's very important. In fact, the folks who are actually sponsoring our bill are hugely supportive of that lawsuit, and also have their own issues with Ticketmaster. The same folks who want to see this bill address the issues with the secondary market also have those same concerns as it relates to the primary market. So that is a game changer there. And again, in terms of the competition, this analysis said it many different times in many different ways, right? They're very clear. Secondary resellers and platforms are not competing with Ticketmaster in the primary market. Resellers are the customers of Ticketmaster. These are not competitors. They want to keep on saying that, but they are buying tickets at whatever price Ticketmaster puts up and wanting to charge a whole lot more with brokers and scalpers who are doing that on these platforms. The platforms will still exist. What we want to get in between there is the extraction from fans and the extraction from artists, contributing nothing to it and pricing folks out.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, the fact the federal antitrust law worked is very exciting for me. So I do think that a lot of good will come from that lawsuit, and I agree with the opposition that that's really important, and it will do a huge amount to change this ecosystem in a way that is protective, hopefully, once we see what the consent decree and all entails. I will add that one of the things that this committee has hoped for in this ticketing space is transferability, is really locking into law that, of course, as the opposition said, once it is your ticket, whether it is paper or otherwise in this digital age, you have the absolute right to give it to your friend or do whatever you want with it. It is your good. You've paid for it. This bill doesn't address that. But hopefully either the federal case will or we'll get there, because I actually do agree that's a really important consumer protection that at least California has not addressed to date. With that, Mr. Hoover.
Thank you.
That just makes it easier to
I just have a
resell the
brief
ticket.
comment. I think I appreciate the author bringing the bill forward. I do agree with a lot of the problems that you've identified, and I think there are problems that definitely need resolutions, need solutions. Unfortunately, I think this solution is one that sort of uses a sledgehammer where a scalpel would be more appropriate, and has the potential to harm consumers in a couple big ways. The first of which is not allowing superfan Assemblymember Bryan to sell his ticket or resell his ticket any price that that the market would bear. I think that consumers, right? This is not a comment about scalpers. There's obviously issues when it comes to scalpers, but consumers themselves should be able to participate in that market. And then also, I do worry pretty substantially about the potential for fraud, because what this bill certainly does not do is it does not eliminate that market that is created by the scarcity, right, of these tickets. The demand for these tickets is simply higher than the supply. That is going to create a market that allows consumers and, in many cases, scalpers to get a price for those tickets that is more than the initial selling price is, just by simple
economics,
the
math,
simple reality of that scarcity that exists. So, I think because that market will always exist, people will always find a place to sell tickets at those market-based prices. I think that does and will push, well-meaning consumers to aftermarket or black market options to attempt to sell those tickets, and that will hurt the consumers that ultimately have the potential to purchase tickets that aren't real. And so for those reasons, unfortunately, we'll not be able to support the bill today. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to say sorry that your date stood you up. If you're watching, shame on you. Secondly, broadly, I just oppose price caps. I don't personally think they work, but I also think it's not been stated enough for me that I just don't think you can regulate downstream competition without upstream effects. And I agree with my colleague. This needs a scalpel to figure out that when I'm looking at that chart, I think we need to target the bots that are buying these tickets and figuring out how we can limit that. But, for example, I sell clothes on Poshmark all the time. I may buy something at Marshall's for $15, but then all of a sudden it goes viral on TikTok and I can sell it for $150. And so I don't necessarily think that going after the secondary sellers is how to fix this. I agree it's a problem. So with that, with Ms. Wicks, I hope we continue to work on this to figure out how we're targeting the people that are buying up these tickets that have no intention of ever going to the concert, to eliminate that. But I just don't think this is quite the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Well, we all know that Taylor Swift changes the world, and this is just further example of that. This whole conversation started after, I believe, the Taylor Swift debacle with her tickets. And again, prices just skyrocketing on the secondary market and people not being able to take advantage of that tour. And I think part of why it was such an example was because she was taking the money she was bringing in as the artist and really, people have talked widely about how she was giving bonuses to her truck drivers and her other support on the tour. And so, I think people wanted the artist in that situation to be getting the benefit of her massive labor that she was putting into this amazing tour. And so, I think it's a really important conversation of how do we uplift the artists, the venues, the people who do this work every day, and the fans who want to go enjoy this. The other day I talked about on Holocaust Remembrance Day, I talked about spiritual resistance. And then in this moment, we need to be finding joy. And I know music is one way that many of us find joy. So we got to make sure fans can get there. And so I really appreciate this effort. I think, obviously, this has been a years in the making conversation, and I'm glad that it is continuing, and I want to thank you for continuing it. This is the first stop in your journey, and as I've heard, I think that work will continue. We'll make sure we recommend those amendments to make sure the entire secondary market is covered by this bill. If there's any question left around that, and I hope that the opposition will work with the author on how we can get to a better place with this bill, especially in light of the fact that we now have a court that I do believe, and I'm hopeful, will deal with the primary market question, which is so critically important, but it leaves the secondary market really... There's no reason that court would address the problems that are happening on the secondary market, and so that's what this bill is here to address. And with that, would you like to close?
Yes, and thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ward wants to speak.
And I'll be very brief in the interest of time. I just want to note that this was heard in the Committee on Arts and Entertainment, Sports and Tourism, and I'll just reflect on those comments there, and I'm happy to move the item.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second, Mr. Haney.
Thank you so much again to you, Madam Chair, and your committee and your staff did an extraordinary job working with us on the amendments and also looking at, again, this incredible analysis, which I think for some of the comments that were raised as to why this is a solution and what it actually will solve. It looks at these questions of whether there's another way to do this. There's a reason why these types of caps actually exist in many, many other countries around the world. In fact, we are somewhat of an outlier on this. And when you look at those countries where they have restricted the market in this way, including price caps, the price of tickets, accessibility for fans, which is the goal here, is significantly lower than in the United States, including in countries where Ticketmaster has a large share of the market. We have to fix the issues with the primary market. The lawsuit is a big part of it. There's other things that we can do. But as long as we allow folks to come in and swoop up all the tickets before real fans can get there and charge you a huge upsale on it, pocketing all of those profits, not putting them into venues and artists, we are going to continue to have the problems we have that price out fans and that don't support these incredible artists and venues. So this is a step forward, I hope, and I absolutely will commit to working with anyone on making sure we're targeting the most egregious examples and the larger resellers who are profiting the most and also driving up the prices out of the reach of fans. So with that, respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. And thank you for your nice comments about the
All
committee.
right.
I'll note that, as the opposition said, we agreed that we needed to look at the entire ecosystem. And as you said, we put on a hearing to that subject that was incredible. That's
a lot more about this than I expected.
Julie for her hard work on this over the
more
years.
impressed with them
let's
than
call
the
roll.
Senate, the U.S. Senate.
Item number 2, AB 1720 by Assemblymember Haney. The motion is due pass to appropriations. Bauer-Cahan.
Aye.
Bauer-Cahan, aye. Aguiar-Curry. Macedo.
No.
Macedo, no. Bryan. DeMaio. Hoover. Hoover, no. Irwin. Lowenthal. McKinner. McKinner, aye. Ortega. Patterson. Petrie Norris. Ward. Ward, aye. Wicks. Wicks not voting. Wilson.
The bill has 3 votes. We'll leave it open for absent members. I think everyone's out having lunch.
And it ended up passing, I learned.
And now,
later,
with
and
Mr.
going on
Zabur, who has been
to
so
the Assembly
patient.
for a vote. We'll see what happens with this bill. You know, I thought they did a really good job of kind of cutting through what the bill could do, not being bogged down by kind of Stubhub's weird arguments with this criminologist. I don't think anyone bought into the fraud thing, and that impressed me. You know, I think you're a pretty smart group here, so we will keep you guys posted what happens. Thank you for tuning in and watching this hearing with me.